What's going on, guys? Blake here from MyDollarGMotorsports.com. Today we're going to be changing the serpentine belt, the belt tensioner, and the idler pulley on this Ford Focus. Here's a quick look at the parts. This is the belt tensioner, which it looks like, luckily, it's only held on with 2 bolts. The idler pulley and the belt. And when you look down in here, the first thing you see is the power. Well, no, is the power steering pump? Yeah, I think the power steering pump. But it looks like you're not going to have enough room with this gap between the frame and the belt, but it'll fit because this is a new belt that I've already put on it once. We had an emergency on the side of the road, and I had to change this in a parking lot. So the belt's new, but we're going to check it when we take it off. It still looks like it's in pretty good shape, but we'll check it when we take it off and see if it needs to be replaced again. There's still a lot of squeaking going on, so when I took it off the last time, the tensioner could have been a little tighter, I felt, so it was time to just go ahead and change the whole thing. And while you're at it, you might as well just go ahead and change the idler pulley. Now, you don't have to take the wheel off to do this. There's actually enough room if you just lay up under the front. You can reach back behind and reach all the belts. But for the sake of comfort today, we're going to go ahead and take the wheel off. Here's what we got from the bottom. There's the tensioner there. And you just take and put a wrench on this and pull it this direction, and the belt will get some slack in it and you can pull it off. Then you got all your belts here. It runs under the air conditioner compressor there. And then, let's see how much we can see up under here. Yeah, it's a tight fit. But it'll go. I've done it before. It'll definitely go. It looks like it's going to be tough, but it's not as bad as it looks. So if I'm not mistaken, that should be the idler pulley. Yeah, that should be the idler pulley there. So we may take the coolant overflow tank off the top to be able to just reach down and get it. You know, I swear I've taken that tank off more times to do stuff on this car. That thing is so in the way of like everything you need to do, like motor mounts, coolant, temp sensor, anything. You got to take that tank off to get to it. So we're going to take the belt loose first, and then we'll see what we got to do from there. All right, I got a short wrench on it. It's 15 millimeter. So now you take and you push it towards the car. Let me zoom out here, towards the car, and that's what releases the slack on the pulley. And like I say, this one, it could be a lot tighter than it is, I think. So there's a lot of slack in this belt. And I'm not going to be able to do this one-handed. So I'm going to put the camera down, but you get a wrench on it, and then you're going to push towards the car to release the slack. Okay, so I took the slack loose on the pulley. Instead of trying to pry it loose right here on the pulley, I just reached back here to the air conditioner compressor while it was loose and just pulled it off here instead. It just slides up and off this pulley. And that's it. Now the belt's off, we'll just pull it off the top. Alright, before I started this, I went ahead and removed the tank because, like I said, it's gonna have to come off anyway on pretty much everything you do. But now you got a lot better view from the top. So the idler pulley is right here, right beside the alternator. So that's great. It's great that it's up top and easy to get to. Alright, I'm gonna pull this belt out of here now. Okay, this belt still appears to be okay. There's no cracking in between the bands, and the back's not cracked. So this belt's only got maybe 4,000 miles on it. so it's still in good shape. So we'll probably end up reusing this one for now, and then saving the other one for when we need it. But always check your belt when you got it off, and even if it's new, just to inspect it, just to make sure there's no cracking in it, because ours was on the edge of breaking after we've been running around in town all day long, and we were almost stranded. So check your belts. Alright, here's a better view of the idler pulley. Now I got good news and bad news. Being right there where it is, you can get it off with a box end wrench, but due to that gap, you're only going to get it off with a box end wrench. Now, a ratcheting wrench, I would recommend if you have that. If you have the money to get one of those, go for it. It's 13 millimeter. So we're going to take it loose and take it off and go and replace it with a new one before we move on to the belt tensioner. Alright, so things just got a little more complicated. So I've got the bolt out, but we got a problem. It's not going to come out without hitting the frame. So I thought, well, what's the easiest thing we could do? We could take these motor mounts loose, or this motor mount loose, and raise it up on this side, but this piece bolts to the block here, so just taking this loose isn't going to help. You're going to have to take all these two loose, these two off, this one off, this one off, and this one off to raise this entire bracket up to be able to get to it. So I guess now we're going to get another jack and block the engine by the oil pan and raise it up so we can get the pulley out. But with that being said, at least now there's the tensioner down here. Let me zoom in a little bit. There's the tensioner, and I can see one bolt on top there for the tensioner and the other one right there. So while we got it up, we may just see if we can do the tensioner from the top once this idler pulley is out of the way. We'll see if that's helpful, or you know, just try it from the bottom, but the bolts are on the top, so maybe we can just do it from the top. Anyway, let's get this engine unmounted. Okay, now I'm just going to use a big screwdriver just to spin this over, raise the block up, and we'll take that mount loose. The mount wouldn't come completely out, like off the bolts, off the studs that were up there. So I'm hoping when I raise it up, it'll break it loose a little bit, and it should just, the whole thing and that bracket should pull right out. So we'll give us a couple turns and then see how we look up top. But it is starting to raise the block up there so we can get to everything a little easier. Alright, I got the motor mount out of the way, and we're getting close. Almost got it. Needs to go a little bit higher, but there's the mount and the bracket out of the car. That's what it looks like. So here's a positive. You can get to the tensioner bolts with a socket. I'm using a 10 millimeter socket and a swivel for the back, and just the socket for the front. But now that I notice it, this tensioner was starting to come apart right through there. So that explains all the noise and why the belt still squeals sometimes. So, alright, so we're going to take this out, and if I run into any problems, I'll let you know. So here's the old tensioner compared to the new one. I'd say this one is a little shot. So you can get the bolts out through the top, but the tensioner is not going to come out from the top, at least not as high as I had the engine raised up. So I had to drop the tensioner out the bottom. So now we're just going to do it in reverse and put this thing back together. Go ahead and put the tensioner back on, and then the idler pulley. Alright, the tensioner is back on down there, and the idler pulley is back on up here. And I actually think I'm going to put the belt back on before I put the motor mount back together. That way I got a little more playroom. Maybe this was a good idea after all, going ahead and taking this loose. So, I didn't do it last time and it was tight, so we'll see how it goes this time putting everything back together. But putting the belt back on is going to be one of those things I got to have two hands for. So I'm going to, between clips here, I'm going to put a static shot of the belt diagram to show you how to get it back on. I know this will be for a Focus double overhead cam Z-Tech with air conditioning, because that'll be the one I'm using. So if you don't have air conditioning, this belt diagram is not going to work for you. But feel free to like pause it here if you need to, or screenshot it. That way you got your own copy of the belt diagram to put the serpentine belt back on. Okay, I gotta admit, at this step, putting the belt back on, I really underestimated how tight the belt tensioner was going to be, especially after the old one was on its way out the door. I fought with it for a long time trying to get it back on all the pulleys. Really it boiled down to the wrench I had wasn't long enough to really get enough leverage to get enough slack in the belt. So if you can find a long 15mm wrench, that's definitely what you want to use, because I was using one that was maybe, what, 4, 5, 6 inches maybe, and I just couldn't get enough pull on it. So the longer the better when you're putting that back. And I also ended up putting the motor mount back on before I put the belt back on, because as I started to pull on the tensioner bolt, the motor started rocking a little bit, and it made me a little nervous, so I wanted it to be a little more secure. But it got dark after this. It got dark real quick, so I really didn't have light to film the rest of it. But just take your time, use a long wrench, and I ran the belt over everything like you see in the picture until I got to the air conditioner compressor pulley, and that was the final belt where I could pull on the tensioner with my left hand and slide the belt onto the air conditioner compressor pulley with my right hand. And that was it. So like I say, I'm sorry I missed out on this last little bit filming it, but it got dark too quick. But thanks for watching.